This watermelon plant is bigger than I am. Oh, check this out. What? It's a watermelon. It's so beautiful. Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the garden. It is a hot, steamy summer day and I've been doing a lot around the farm and I figured it is about time to give you an update because there's been a lot that's been going on. So if you haven't seen any of my videos before, just a real quick recap on what I'm doing here. Behind me is the very beginning of what I hope will become a permaculture food forest. So the idea is you plant a whole bunch of perennial plants like fruit trees and herbs, raspberries and flowering plants that attract beneficial insects, and you basically create an ecosystem of beneficial plants that all help each other grow, and in time you have a really abundant food forest and you could just eat, and it takes less and less work every year. This year I'm including a bunch of annual plants as well, like tomatoes and watermelon and zucchini and all that, and I'll show you that. But the idea is over time this becomes an area full of perennial plants, and essentially it becomes a self-sustaining system where you're able to come on out and eat a bunch of food and it just grows out of the ground. It's going to be really cool. So what's fun is because we've got all this space here and all this really great horse manure, which is super rich in nutrients, everything that we've put in the ground has just completely been amazing. We had some people give us some scraggly looking tomato plants. We had a couple random pumpkin plants that someone gave us. And so we put them in the ground and we thought, what's the worst that could happen? Let's just see what happens. And they've all just blown up, and I'll show you. So this is an apple tree, and this will probably be one of the first ones that bears fruit. It's the oldest of the trees. No fruit this year, but it's still getting established. It's done well. It's grown at least, I'd say, at least a couple feet since I planted it last fall, which is awesome. I have some other perennials as well, like this pawpaw tree, which is doing okay. Do I like pawpaw? I don't know. Do I know what pawpaw tastes like? No, I don't. But is it worth growing? I don't know. I also don't know that. We'll find out. I put a fence around some of the plants to try to protect them from deer browsing. Unfortunately, pretty much all the ones that didn't have a fence around them got eaten like crazy over the winter. And yet, as you can see, they're still coming back strong. So my hope is to fence in this whole area by the end of the year to be able to protect it from deer and rabbits so that perennials can really get established. Here we've got some lemon mint, which is doing really well. If you've never smelled or tasted lemon mint, it's really intense. It's really good. This raspberry vine is coming in pretty strong. We've got 3 vines now that are growing. No fruit this year. Again, it'll probably take a year to establish, but once we put in the fence line, I'm hoping to actually have the raspberry start growing up the side of the fence. We'll see how well that works. This is Jerusalem artichoke, which is not an artichoke and has nothing to do with Jerusalem. It's in the sunflower family, and the thing that I want with this plant is the edible tubers that grow on the base. Those are really good for gut bacteria, and apparently they're just very healthy for you. No flowers yet, but I do have this weird thing happening where there are just an infinite number of mosquitoes that have made their home on the underside of these leaves. Have you ever seen this before? If you know what's going on here, please put it in the comments below. I am so curious to know what's going on here. Spraying this plant goes against like all of my philosophies of trying to do this organically, but that's freaky, right? That's a lot of mosquitoes. I do have a few cherry trees, one sour cherry and one sweet cherry, but like I said, these were browsed by the deer, and so they're not nearly as probably big and strong as they might be otherwise. This pear tree is a bit of a miracle. Before I had covered all this with mulch, I was mowing through here, and this gate here got caught on the side of the mower. It pulled off the entire top of this pear tree, and I thought, that's it, I just killed a plant, I killed a tree, and man, I felt bad. I was like, well, that's progress setback. Well, since that happened, this thing has grown like 3 times as tall as it was before that happened, and I can't even find any signs of damage on this at all. It's crazy. Nature is amazing. And this pear tree here is almost 5 feet tall, which is incredible. So I'm hoping that within the next couple of years we'll have some first fruits that we can eat. Our raised beds have done amazing too. We started a bunch of stuff from seed, and now it's just like taking over. You know, we've got greens and kale, and we did have a bunch of herbs and stuff, but the cucumbers started taking over. But it's a worthwhile compromise because we're getting a ton of cucumbers. I've started letting a few of these plants go to seed so that I can harvest the seeds and use them for next year. Like I said, some people gave us some old dying tomato plants, and as you can see, these things just completely took off. Honestly, the problem is these tomato plants have done so well, they've actually started shading out some of the fruit trees that I'm trying to grow. So we're gonna be pruning this guy back a little bit because I don't want an apple tree to be stunted for a few tomatoes. We've got a pumpkin patch growing in really strong. Oh, and check this out. Check this out. This watermelon plant is bigger than I am. Oh, and check this out. What? It's a watermelon. It's so beautiful. We actually have 2 that are doing really well. I can't wait to see what these taste like when they're ripe. Our hazelnuts are coming in pretty well. And we've got these early glow strawberries, which give us a little harvest at the beginning of the spring. We had a couple of them. It was actually the first fruit that I had ever grown on the property, and it was really cool. All right, it's a big moment for me. This is the very first time I've eaten any fruit that I grew on my own property. So I know it's just a strawberry, but this is the beginning of something really great. So let's see how it tastes. Oh my word, that is so good. It's like warmed by the sun. That is like so sweet. Oh man, this is really exciting. As you can see, the strawberry plant put out runners and established itself as multiple other strawberry plants, and so hopefully next year we'll have an even bigger harvest. One plant that we don't eat, but I've mentioned before, is this one. It's called comfrey. Comfrey is a nutrient accumulator. So as I said in an earlier video, comfrey puts down a really deep taproot and gets minerals from deep in the soil and then brings them up into its leaves, which you can chop and drop to share the nutrients with other plants. In fact, you can do this a few times a year. Just the other day, I chopped and dropped most of the comfrey plants, and I used them to fertilize and kind of as a green manure, it's called, to fertilize some of the perennials in the food forest. I put the comfrey around some trees and then added some mulch on top of that. This is a way of sharing nutrients among the plants in the food forest in a completely hyper-organic way that doesn't use any fertilizer or anything like that. And pretty much everybody who does permaculture loves comfrey. It's like their favorite plant. Oh, and get this. This is how it looks just 1 week after I chopped it. It's already coming back. So I mentioned mulch, and you could probably tell that the layout of this garden is a little bit different than it was before when I had all the plants kind of separated with grass in between them. I've been doing 2 things. One, I've been sheet mulching. Sheet mulching is where you take something like cardboard and put it down and get it wet so that it blocks the grass from growing. And then you put on top of that some sort of nutrient-rich material. In my case, I used that old pile of horse manure, which has been coming in so handy. And then on top of that, you put something like wood chips or whatever. And what that does is not only does it prevent the grass from growing in that spot, but it also begins to decompose everything underneath the wood chips and the wood chips themselves. And over time, you end up with a really rich soil that has a lot of organic matter in it and also does a really good job of maintaining moisture and holding on to moisture towards the surface. I haven't watered in a couple days and it's still pretty moist here. But you may be wondering, where do I get all that mulch? Well, that has been what I've been spending the bulk of my time doing. Since we moved into the property, there have been these overgrown patches on the property. Weedy areas where a bunch of small maple trees started growing. There was an old burn pile with a bunch of sticks thrown in, and one of them, there's a tree that had fallen down, and so it had become completely overgrown. And so I've spent the last couple of months methodically going through and getting rid of all of these overgrown areas. It's been a lot of work. I've had some friends help me occasionally, but what's awesome about it is that I've been able to chip and mulch all of the wood that's been left over in the ground. So I've been collecting branches all over the property and turning them into wood chips, and now I've got this huge pile of really great wood chips that I can use for my garden for years to come. Along with some of the other stuff I'm doing, like adding comfrey, it also breaks down the wood chips over time and creates a healthy fungal network under the soil, which is great for perennials and fruit trees and things like that. Plus, as I already mentioned, it's a phenomenal mulch to keep moisture in and to keep the ground a bit more insulated. One of the ideas with permaculture is that you try to work within the systems that you have. What I've discovered is that our chickens love to eat sorrel and comfrey, which we're growing here, so we can give that to them and their poop goes into our compost, which then comes back into the garden. It's all a virtuous cycle. So yeah, it may not seem all that impressive as it stands right now, but let me tell you, I've come a long way with this just basically being a hobby. Apart from my big fence project, I've also started thinking about ways I can use the rest of this land here, and I'm actually starting to imagine what would happen if I were to start planting some row crops here like corn and things. I'm even imagining a whole orchard over here between the trees with some indigenous pollinator wildflowers going between them, and just turning this into a paradise. It just gets me so excited. I dream of a day in about 4 or 5 years when whoever comes over to visit, we could just walk out here and just pick food off of trees and eat food off the ground, and it's just a return to Eden, even on my own property. It gets me fired up, and it makes me willing to work long, sweaty days in the summer heat. It really is the dream to imagine this place completely transformed, clearing out these fence lines. I kind of want to build a trail around the outside of the property. I have so many dreams and ideas, and now that I've put about 1 year's worth of work into this garden, I'm very much convinced that it is possible. Oh, and check this out. As I was clearing out areas, I found this perfectly beautiful mulberry tree, and it's given us a little bit of fruit. Look at this. There we go. Yum. It's just the beginning, guys. See you on the next video. Was that necessary, Chester? Here you go, guys. Oh, sorry.